Now, owning a home when you don't own the freehold can pose problems. You and yours has reported before how leaseholders can face ever-increasing ground rents, and some complain that it can put off buyers when they've been looking to sell. There are 4.2 million leasehold properties in England, and the laws that govern them are currently being consulted on. One problem that can come up involves the cost of maintaining the building and its grounds. Well, our reporter Jay Unger has been looking into the issue.
I have, Peter. As well as charging ground rent, freehold companies are able to charge leaseholders for maintenance work. Now, Louise Stewart got in touch with us about it. 3 years ago, she bought a 2-bed flat in a converted house in Tunbridge Wells. Back then, the company told her solicitors there was no outstanding maintenance needed. But since she's moved in, that changed, and the freehold company Mount View Estates plc issued a legal notice saying essential works costing around £50,000 needed doing. And that cost would be split between the leaseholders of the 4 flats in the building. Now, Louise challenged the cost and extent of the work. Due to delays in the process, no work was carried out last year, but then another notice came this year saying the amount they needed to pay has almost doubled to around £90,000, although the work remains the same. I went to meet Louise outside the flats in Tunbridge Wells with Andy Sperry. He owns one of the other flats.
Well, you can see it's an impressive building. It's a Victorian property. You know, there are bits here, the windows, they're wooden, traditional sash and case, but in need of a lick of paint for sure. The front door there, quite a grand front door, in need of more than a lick of paint. But overall, you know, it's a strong building.
Now, these are flats, so you own the downstairs flat alongside your neighbour Andy Sperry, who's also here. Did Mount View get in contact with you at all?
When I moved in, when I bought the place, I was just told there was just going to be minor works, sort of a bit of redecoration, things like that upstairs, which I thought that's absolutely fine. You don't have to save an awful lot for it. But then I got this letter through the post that said they were planning on doing full external works of the property. So it was a bit of a shock, to be honest.
I mean, a lot of the biggest cost is for scaffolding. Quotes around 70,000 plus 20% VAT plus 10% management fees. So it comes around £90,000, and I'm responsible for a third. So I'm looking at over £30,000.
How is that different to last year?
Well, it's increased considerably. The scaffolding costs last year, one quote was for £5,000, which was probably pretty on the low side. This year, it's £23,250. I mean, that just seems incredible.
Louise Stewart and Andy Sperry in Tunbridge Wells.
Jay, they own the flats. Why aren't they able to get their own contractors in?
Louise asked this question last year. Now, she got some other contractors to quote for the work, but Mount View Estates are ultimately in charge of organising any repairs and maintenance. This year, Louise was sent the more expensive quote, so she spoke to an independent surveyor about the costs involved.
They recommended a large building firm that does a lot of work in Tunbridge Wells, much bigger properties than this, and it comes out at significantly less. So it's around £50,000 plus VAT plus the 10% management fee. So all in all, it would still be around £25,000 less.
What happens next if you can't afford to pay them for the maintenance? What could happen to your properties?
Well, the only option really is that to have to remortgage and then be paying a lot higher monthly fees for the property.
And ultimately, if we decided, if we couldn't do that, we'd be in breach of the lease. I mean, the ultimate sanction is they can recover the property. This is obviously causing me a great deal of distress. I've gone to my local MP, Greg Clark, who also happens to be the business secretary. He's written to them on the most recent occasion asking for a meeting, and they wrote back and said they didn't see the need for a meeting because I was the only resident who was concerned. Clearly that's not the case. You're speaking to my neighbour as well. So, it's difficult to see how we move forward to a position where they send out these demands, we go back with questions, they don't respond to those questions. I'm not sure how we take it forward from here.
So, Jay, what do you know about the company that owns the freehold, the ones demanding that they pay for all this maintenance.
Mountview Estates plc is a large company listed on the London Stock Exchange. Last year it had a turnover of over £70 million. We contacted them about Louise's complaint. It told us there are a number of inaccuracies in our report. It says it's been following all its statutory obligations and has considered a range of competitive quotes for the work, including ones provided by the leaseholder.
Jay Unger, thanks very much indeed. Well, earlier I spoke to Mark Hayward about this. He's the Chief Executive of the National Association of Estate Agents, Property Mark. Are freehold companies legally allowed to demand that these types of work are done, and which company carries it out?
Well, it all really goes down to what is written in the lease. This is quite an old lease, and I know the company involved acquired the freehold at a later date, but it is very important when you're buying a property to go through the small print. And the reason the government is extremely concerned about leasehold is that this is not an isolated incident. Leaseholders have possibly made some assumptions when buying a property, but if there are legal obligations set down in the lease, the freeholder can exercise those.
So you mean it may be in the small print?
It's in the lease document is in legalese, it's lengthy, so any consumer buying a leasehold property needs to get proper advice from a lawyer that is used to dealing with the leasehold properties. Of course, this is an older property as well, it's not a brand new one, it's not a new build, it does cause concern.
So how important is it to companies in this sort of situation and their shareholders that they are able to require leaseholders to pay for maintenance work?
Well, they are an investment company. They have a business model. Presumably this fits into this business model, and they will be looking at various income streams moving forward.
We've heard that the government's consulting on this, the rights of leaseholders. Is there anything in the new terms proposed that would give someone like Louise more protection?
I think that the issue is retrospective action. She bought the property, it's leasehold, it's got some serious obligations within this lease. I know that the Law Commission is looking at it to make sure that these are not replicated moving forward, but it's really what the government is going to do with the situation that leaseholders have inherited. The government is extremely concerned about all aspects of leasehold property. They are looking at it, it's just really making sure that the consumer's interests are made apparent and adopted.
That was Mark Hayward from Property Mark speaking to me earlier this morning.